Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? And I have a text, and it is from, because I won't take a religious text from a known extremist or fanatic, it's from Cardinal Newman. Recently, Prime Minister Blair's urging, beatified on his way to canonization, a man whose apologia made many Anglicans reconsider their fealty and made many people join the Roman Catholic Church, and is considered, I think rightly, a great Christian thinker. My text from the Apologia. The Catholic Church, said Newman, holds it better for the sun and moon to drop from heaven, for the earth to fail, and for all the many millions on it to die in extremest agony, than that one soul, I will not say will be lost, but should commit one venial sin, should tell one willful untruth, or should steal one farthing without excuse. You'll have to say it's beautifully phrased, ladies and gentlemen. But to me, and here's my proposition, what we have here, and picked from no mean source, is a distillation of precisely what is twisted and immoral in the faith mentality. It's essential fanaticism, its consideration of the human being as raw material, and its fantasy of purity. Once you assume a creator and a plan, it makes us objects in a cruel experiment whereby we are created sick and commanded to be well. I'll repeat that. Created sick and then ordered to be well. And over us to supervise this is installed a celestial dictatorship, a kind of divine North Korea. Greedy, exigent, I would say more than exigent, greedy for uncritical praise from dawn till dusk, and swift to punish the original sins with which it so tenderly gifted us in the very first place. However, let no one say there's no cure. Salvation is offered. Redemption, indeed, is promised at the low price of the surrender of your critical faculties. Religion, it might be said, must be said, would have to admit, makes extraordinary claims, but though I would maintain that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, rather daringly provides not even ordinary evidence for its extraordinary supernatural claims. Therefore, we might begin by asking, and I'm asking my opponent as well as you when you consider your voting, is it good for the world to appeal to our credulity and not to our skepticism? Is it good for the world to worship a deity that takes sides in wars and human affairs? To appeal to our fear and to our guilt, is it good for the world? To our terror of death, is it good to appeal? To preach guilt and shame about the sexual act and the sexual relationship, is this good for the world? And asking yourself the while, are these really religious responsibilities, as I maintain they are? To terrify children with the image of hell and eternal punishment, not just of themselves, but of their parents and those they love. Perhaps worst of all, to consider women an inferior creation. Is that good for the world? And can you name me a religion that has not done that? To insist that we are created and not evolved in the face of all the evidence. To say that certain books of legend and myth, man-made and primitive, are revealed, not man-made code. Religion forces nice people to do unkind things, and also makes intelligent people say stupid things. Handed a small baby for the first time, is it your first reaction to think, beautiful, almost perfect, now please hand me the sharp stone for its genitalia that I may do the work of the Lord? No. It is, as the great physicist Steven Weinberger has very aptly put it, in the ordinary moral universe, the good will do the best they can, the worst will do the worst they can. But if you want to make good people do wicked things, you'll need religion. Now, I've got now 1 minute and 57 seconds to say why I think this is very self-evident in our material world. Let me ask Tony again, because he's here, and because the place where he is seeking peace is the birthplace of monotheism. So you might think it was unusually filled with refulgence and love and peace. Everyone in the civilized world has roughly agreed, including the majority of Arabs and Jews and the international community, that there should be enough room for two states, for two peoples in the same land. I think we have a rough agreement on that. Why can't we get it? The UN can't get it, the US can't get it, the Quartet can't get it, the PLO can't get it, the Israeli Parliament can't get it. Why can't they get it? Because the parties of God have a veto on it, and everybody knows that this is true. Because of the divine promises made about this territory, there will never be peace, there will never be compromise. There will instead be misery, shame, and tyranny, and people will kill each other's children for ancient books and caves and relics. And who is going to say that this is good for the world? And that's just the example nearest to hand. Have you looked lately at the possibility that we used to discuss as children in fear? What will happen when messianic fanatics get hold of an apocalyptic weapon? Well, we're about to find that out as we watch the Islamic Republic of Iran and its party of God allies make a dress rehearsal for precisely this. Have you looked lately at the revival of Tsarism in Putin's Russia, where the black-cowled, black-coated leadership of Russian Orthodoxy is draped over an increasingly xenophobic, tyrannical, expansionist and aggressive regime? Have you looked lately at the teaching in Africa and the consequences of it, of a church that says AIDS may be wicked, but not as wicked as condoms? That's exactly no seconds left, ladies and gentlemen. I've done my best. Believe me, I have more. Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? If you want to be awe-inspired, ladies and gentlemen, and let me just tell you that those of us who do not believe we are divinely created, let alone divinely supervised, are not immune to the idea of awe and beauty and the transcendent. Let me invite you to look for a moment at the pictures taken by the Hubble telescope. Some of you may have done it. If you haven't done it now, or yet, do it soon. The extraordinary revelations of swirling, yet somehow beautiful new galaxies in color and depth and majesty like nothing I think the human eye has ever seen. Turn away from that if you wish and gaze at a burning bush in an illiterate desert part of the Middle East and say that that's where revelation comes from. I don't believe you'll be able to do it. Or read a page of Stephen Hawking on the absolute magnificence and consistency and underlying beauty. As Einstein says, the great miracle of physics is there are no miracles. It all carries on, holding together all the time. There are no interruptions in its order. There are no suspensions of it just to please Joshua or just to please some sect or tribe or group. No. It's much, much, much more impressive than that. Hawking has a colleague who looked at the event horizon of the black hole. If you could travel towards a black hole, not yet possible to do, if you could, in theory, the event horizon is the point at which the black hole is pulling everything into itself. So over into the black hole goes light itself. It's so strong it can pull light back into itself. It's really awe-inspiring. A lot more, say, than a crowd of pigs infested by devils running down a hill into the sea, which is a piece of sorcery and cheap magic of the sort that shouldn't impress any thinking person. Think about a black hole instead. Pulling the light into itself, the event horizon just reorganizing nature. So that if you could get to that lip, the lip of that event horizon, and fall in and go in, you could, in theory, see the past and the future stretching before and in front of you. You would see time. except you wouldn't have the time to do it, of course, if you were a mere primate, as we are. But Hawking has a colleague who says if he knew he was dying of a terminal illness, that's how he'd want to go out, is over the lip of the event horizon. That would be majesty. That would be magnificence. That would be awe-inspiring. That would be apocalyptic. So it's in the natural world, it's in the world of science and the world of innovation and discovery and doubt. We wouldn't have discovered any of these things if we'd taken the religious story for granted to begin with. We would have said we already know enough. We know. God made this. God wants it this way. What's the need for inquiry? We already have all the information we need. The big difference between this side of the house, mine, and the other, is this. I am absolutely certain that I do not know, but that it might be possible to find out, and that doubt and skepticism and innovation and inquiry are the only means by which wonder and beauty and awe and symmetry will be discovered, and beyond those peaks we can yet see, new, more wonderful peaks will rise. Whereas, on the Wilson side of the house, it is said, we already have the certainty. We know that God created us, and we even claim to know his mind and what he wants of us. And I just invite you to open your minds to the possibility that the skeptical and the inquiring and the doubtful will be better than anything that calls itself faith. Because anything that calls itself faith calls itself certainty. And for certainty, I think there is no place in an institute of intellectual mentation and higher education. And I'm very grateful to you all for giving me the chance to say so. Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? Now, I am absolutely convinced that the main source of hatred in the world is religion and organized religion. Absolutely convinced of it. And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt. And I claim that right. So when I say, as the subtitle of my book, that I think religion poisons everything, I'm not just doing what publishers like and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us in our most basic integrity. It says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian commission. It means we can't be good to one another. It means we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone whom we fear. The essence of sadomasochism, the essence of abjection, the essence of the master's slave labor, and that knows that death is coming and can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil, and though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity. Is it not the case that the spread of Christianity, about which you spoke so warmly and affectingly in your opening remarks, attributing it to the innate truth of the Bible story, was spread by that means, or because the Emperor Constantine decided to make Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire? Which, in your view, contributed more to the spread of the faith?
The Holy Spirit.
I rest my case. You give me the awful impression, I hate to have to say it, of someone who hasn't read any of the arguments against your position ever.
So what if God actually exists, sir? Would he not have been good to you?
No. He wouldn't, because if that were true, it would mean that I had an eternal supervising parent who would never die and let me get on with my life, never let me grow up, and keep me under surveillance
But you have, sir.
And supervision every minute of my life.
But you
constantly asked me to be thanking and praising him.
Yeah.
I think it would
that
be
wasn't part of the
it would be
scenario.
like living in North Korea. I think it would be a horrible outcome.
Well, not sure that God is Kim Jong-il, but what if what I said is true?
Well, on Kim Jong-il, he has a different opinion.
Let's say that the consensus is that our species, including the higher primates, Homo sapiens, has been on the planet for at least 100,000 years. In order to be a Christian, you have to believe that for 98,000 years, our species suffered and died, most of its children dying in childbirth, most other people having a life expectancy of about 25, dying of their teeth, famine, struggle, bitterness, war, suffering, misery, all of that. For 98,000 years, heaven watches it with complete indifference. And then 2,000 years ago thinks, that's enough of that. It's time to intervene. The best way to do this would be by condemning someone to a human sacrifice somewhere in the less literate parts of the Middle East. Let's appeal to the Chinese, for example, where people can read and study evidence and have a civilization. Let's go to the desert and have another revelation there. This is nonsense. It can't be believed by a thinking person. Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? If it was true, it would have two further implications. It would have to mean that the designer of this plan was unbelievably lazy and inept, or unbelievably callous and cruel and indifferent and capricious. And that is the case with every argument for design and every argument for revelation and intervention that has ever been made. All of this could be part of a plan. There is no way an atheist can prove it's not. But it's some plan, isn't it? With mass destruction, pitiless extermination, annihilation going on all the time, and all of this set in motion on a scale that's absolutely beyond our imagination, in order that the Pope can tell people not to jerk off. In his comment, one of the few he's made, on the institutionalization of rape and torture and maltreatment of children in Catholic institutions, he said, it's a very severe crisis which involves us, he said, in the following: in the need for applying to these victims the most loving pastoral care. Well, I'm sorry. They've already had that. The rape and torture of children is not something to be relativized. It's not something to be excused as a few bad priests. It's the crime that cries out for punishment. It's the thing that if we were accused of on this side of the House, we would die rather than admit. And if we were guilty of it, would kill ourselves.
Your view would be the same as mine, that child sacrifice is reprehensible, would it not?
Did Abraham think child sacrifice was an okay idea?
He obeyed God and God intervened. The ultimate question is, does God think child sacrifice, since he sent his own son to be the ultimate sacrifice?
He appears to be in favor of it.
He does appear to be in favor of it, but in context.
I agreed that we were not.
I'm
asking.
It's not scorning the three delightful children who result, who are everything to me and who are my only chance of even a glimpse of a second life, let alone an immortal one. And I'll tell you something, if I was told to sacrifice them to prove my devotion to God, if I was told to do what all monotheists are told to do, and admire the man who said, yes, I'll gut my kid to show my love of God, I'd say, no, fuck you. What about Fräulein Freisel in Austria, whose father, unwilling to get out of the way, kept her in a dungeon where she didn't see daylight for 24 years, and came down most nights to rape and sodomize her, often in front of the children who were the victims of the previous tax offenses. Imagine how she must have begged him. Imagine how she must have pleaded. Imagine for how long. Imagine how she must have prayed every day, how she must have beseeched heaven. Imagine, for 24 years, and no answer at all. Nothing. Now, you say that's all right that she went through that, because she'll get a better deal in another life? I have to ask you, if you can be morally or ethically serious and postulate such a question. No, that had to happen, and heaven did watch it with indifference, because it knows that score will later on be settled. So it was well worth her going through it. She'll have a better time next time. I don't see how you can look anyone in the face, or live with yourself and say anything so hideously, wickedly immoral as that, or even imply it. There, that's my answer.
Do you believe that God, if he's provided everything for you, has rights on your life?
No.
Because?
Why should he? What gives him this right?
Because he owns you. He's created everything for you. He's kept you alive.
Well, I don't want to be owned. I don't want to be owned, and I don't recognize anyone's right to own me.
So ownership is a bad thing?
Of people, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's been widely considered. I mean, I know the Bible does call for slavery, as it calls for genocide, but that doesn't make it right.
Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? The great thing about being religious is this. When the evidence against you becomes overwhelming, and you can see the amazing intricacies of the Big Bang, and the extraordinary matter of the Hubble red light shift, and the things we can now see through Mr. Hubble's telescope, and when you see the extraordinary variety of species, religion says, come to think of it, that is true. In fact, it shows that God was even more ingenious than we had thought him in the first place. Every time any new evidence comes to light, it's claimed for, well, it fits with the unoverthrowable theory that we already have. But there is no way you can take a step from the laws of physics, the observable creation of the cosmos, that leads you to the belief that there is an intervening personal God. There is no possible way, no one's even tried it, of getting from the laws of physics or biology to any such idea. So from the person who says, I'm a deist, I don't think all of this can be an accident, there must be some cosmic force, I say, I can't disprove it, though I think the cosmos functions without it, but you have all your work, sir, or ma'am, still ahead of you before you can say that Jesus of Nazareth was a real person, let alone that he was the Son of God, let alone that his mother was a virgin, let alone that he was resurrected. None of these things, by the way, would prove he was the Son of God. If they did happen, what is this? It's not physics, okay? It's not biology, it's not science, it's faith. Why don't you fly under your true flag, sir? Why don't you say these things must be believed as articles of faith? Don't try and derive it from science.
God has enlisted me to help in his work of bringing the universe back into order. Is that
you have a very high opinion of yourself.
Well,
I'd love to be with you the next time someone comes up to Bertha and says they're hearing voices and it's God. You're going to throw your arms around him and say, you too, what luck?
If you'll write and say, look, you've got about one chance left now. Aren't you going to take it? I'm writing to you as a friend. Though it's put in a nice way, it's part of a phenomenon that I've always thought of as very disgusting, which is the belief of the religious which they keep expressing and have done for centuries, that surely now you're dying, your fears will overcome your reason. I hope I don't have to underline what's horrible about that. There's an element of blackmail to it. And an element also of tremendous insecurity, I think, on their part. I mean, they don't seem to feel they'd win the argument so easily with someone who was mentally and physically strong. By the way, I think they're right. There are also people who say, it's God's curse on me that I should have it near my throat because that was the organ of blasphemy which I used for so many years. I've used many other organs to blaspheme as well if it comes to that.
There are arguments about how best to interpret those texts, how best to interpret what it means to be a follower of Christ.
I would prefer to say that Christianity is by definition incoherent and contradictory, and thus that it allows any number of readings, and if people wish to find authority from these texts, they'll always be able to do so. But why are they bothering to raid this rubbishy text for authority in the first place? Why can't they think for themselves? What matters is not what you think, but how you think. And all the discoveries that have been made, and all the enlightenment that's come to us is from the scientific and the philosophical method, not that of a priori assumptions of faith or the belief that wisdom comes from revelation. That's what I assume faith must be, is the willingness to assume what you have to prove. And to come before an educated audience and say, it's true because it's in the Bible. And I believe in the Bible because it's true. I don't think that's evidence. I don't think that's argument. But if it's faith, I suppose that's what it must be. Is there anyone who would like to challenge me?
People always demand respect for their faith. You've noticed this, I think. Why should I respect someone who makes enormous claims on no evidence? And when confronted with that fact, says, well, I don't need any evidence, I've got faith. I think extraordinary claims, such as that they know not just that there is a God, but that they know his mind, they know his instructions, they've had revealed truth from him. A claim like that demands extraordinary evidence, instead of which they say, no, how about no evidence at all, and just take me on faith? Why am I supposed to respect that? I don't respect it. I suspect it.
Mormons, for example, will always tell you how great the work of their missionaries is in Africa. Why are they telling me this? All I said to them was, your religion is based on a forgery by a well-known conjurer and fraud who claimed to have found gold plates from God in a hole in upstate New York. People who believe in it are deluded. He's also, for a very long time, refused to admit that black people had souls or could join the church in any real capacity. So you have missionary work as well. I'm sorry to hear it, if it's spreading that garbage.
I knew it would come up, that we'd be told about charity. And I take this very seriously. Because we know, ladies and gentlemen, as it happens, we're the first generation of people who do really, what the cure for poverty really is. It eluded people for a long, long time. The cure for poverty has a name, in fact. It's called the empowerment of women. If you give women some control over the rate at which they reproduce, if you give them some say, take them off the animal cycle of reproduction to which nature and some doctrine, religious doctrine, condemns them, and then if you're throwing a handful of seeds perhaps and some credit, the floor of everything in that village, not just poverty, but education, health and optimism will increase. It doesn't matter, try it in Bangladesh, try it in Bolivia, it works all the time. Name me one religion that stands for that, or ever has. Wherever you look in the world and you try to remove the shackles of ignorance and disease and stupidity from women, it is invariably the clerisy that stands in the way. Probably there are some here who think maybe I have a Buddhist option here. Has to notice that even Buddha is born from a slit in his mother's side. Anything but the filth and disgust of having to contemplate the female reproductive system. What could be more obviously man-made than this? And made in a barbaric period, even of the history of the male sex. It's plain as could be, because yet again you get it. Anything but the vagina. Disgust for females. Contempt for females. Revulsion from menstrual blood. Revulsion from the female genitalia. I personally do not regard the female genitalia in that way. I hope you don't know.
I'm a liberal Christian, and I don't take the stories from the scripture literally. I don't believe that Jesus died for our sins, for example. Do you make any distinction between fundamentalist faith and liberal religion?
Well, only in this respect, I would say that if you don't believe that Jesus of Nazareth was the Christ, in other words, the Messiah, and that he rose again from the dead, and that by his sacrifice our sins are forgiven, you are really not in any meaningful sense a Christian.
But I still consider myself a Christian and a person of faith, so I think it's very interesting.
Faith in what? Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Yes.
Faith in the resurrection.
I don't believe in the resurrection literally. I do believe in new life.
What ways you believe in it?
Well, if you would like for me to talk a little bit about what I believe, I'd be happy to do that.
Well, I would actually, yes.
Okay. I don't know whether or not God exists in the first place. Let me just say that.
People say sometimes, don't I ever get tired of debating with the religious? No, absolutely I don't, because you never know what they're going to say next.
These particular people, right, engage in a very interesting interpretation, right, of these texts, of the meanings of what Christianity actually involves, right, and then proceed on the basis of that interpretation to some kind of personal relationship, personal experience with God, personal contact through their personal interpretation of the Scripture, and it allows them to render a certain kind of meaning vis-a-vis this particular religious tradition.
You can make anything up like that as you go along, as far as I can see. It means it's white noise. White noise, what you're talking to me. Absolutely meaningless. I just have to say I make my living by scrutinizing words. That's what I do. Not a single thing you just said made a word of sense to me.
Well, that's because
I don't think it would if written. I don't think it would if written down either.
What is it about the way I'm talking that you can't understand?
It's ingratiating tone, I think. Probably. and the unctuousness of it, and the extreme imprecision.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I think that's probably what I don't like.
Oh my goodness! Extreme imprecision. That is
extreme vagueness and imprecision.
Vagueness and imprecision.
I'm not saying mysticism is not great, am I? I'm saying that the belief that there is a divine revelation that can be interpreted by humans, giving themselves secular power in the here and now, is a real merit. Once you grant that there's been a revelation of God to some humans, sometimes, in some places, to be interpreted by a priesthood, then the next thing you will find is that you are being told what to do, what to eat, what you can read, who you can go to bed with, by someone who is no better a mammal or primate than yourself, who claims the right to run your life and your sex life and your mind and your reading matter in the name of God. I won't have it, okay?
Would you have predicted that a small democracy in Northern Europe would have its embassies burned down and its consulates burned down and its citizens and nationals attacked and kidnapped because its prime minister refused to suppress some cartoons in an afternoon newspaper?
And people say, why do I focus on the extremists? Because the extremists have the initiative, and because I haven't started yet. His Holiness the Pope condemned what? The State Department condemned the cartoons, not the violence, not the campaign. The Archbishop of Canterbury condemned the cartoons. Every church I know of condemned the blasphemy of the cartoons, not the campaign of murder and sabotage. Same with Salman Rushdie. When the Ayatollah Khomeini offered money, publicly, in his own name, without shame, for suborning of murder of a novelist, the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, the Chief Rabbi of Israel, His Holiness the Pope, the Archbishop of Canterbury, all condemned what? The novel, the author, for blasphemy. Now get used to this, because you may be living in the last few years where you can complain about it. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the barbarians are not at the gate. They're not at the gate. They're well inside. And who held open the door for them? The other religious did. These are not minor threats. These are threats to the very core of what we believe is the essential thing for a society, which is the ability to ask questions, to read the books we choose, to pursue unfettered investigations. And these are flatly negated by the claims of a religion that says it is the answer to everything. These people are not pacifists, ladies and gentlemen, nor are they anti-imperialists. If you haven't noticed, they call for the restoration of a lost empire, the caliphate, and the imposition of Sharia law on all non-believers within its borders. That's not pacifism. That's not anti-imperialism. Next, you'll have militias of this kind with their own chaplains within the United States Armed Forces. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to have Wahhabi preachers in the US Armed Forces? Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? So unless you're willing to commit suicide for yourself and for this culture, get used to the compromises you'll have to make and the eventual capitulation that will come to you. But bloody well don't do that in my name, because I'm not doing it. You surrender in your own name, leave me out of it. I'm going to fight these people and every other theocrat all the way. All the way. Mockery of religion is one of the most essential things, because to demystify supposedly holy texts that are dictated by God and show that they are man-made, what you have to show their internal inconsistencies and absurdities. And one of the beginnings of human emancipation is the ability to laugh at authority. It's a very simple story. You only have to read the Quran and the Hadith. Of course, he's not a prophet. I mean, he's an epileptic plagiarist. It's a man who went into spasm to order and summoned the same angel as he was jealous of the Christians for having. It's a boring plagiarism of the worst bits of Judaism and Christianity. Unoriginal rip-off by someone who's clearly mentally ill. I neither know nor care whether however many Muslims you claim there are offended or not by my views of religion. I maintain that there is no such thing as revealed religion, that the holy books are man-made, that so are all the religions man-made. They're open to the same criticism from any human being. The fetishization of them is stupid. Now, it pisses me off, I'm sorry to say, to be all the time lectured about the Third Reich and fascism. For you to say of Nazism that it was the implementation of the work of Charles Darwin is a filthy slander. undeserving of you and an insult to this audience. If it's an atheistic regime, then how come that in the first chapter of Mein Kampf, Hitler says he's doing God's work and executing God's will in destroying the Jewish people? How come the Führer oath that every officer of the party and the army had to take, making Hitler into a minor god, begins, I swear in the name of Almighty God, my loyalty to the Führer? How come that on the belt buckle of every Nazi soldier it says Gott mit uns, God on our side? How come that the first treaty made by the National Socialist dictatorship, the very first, is with the Vatican? This is not a difference of emphasis between us. To suggest that there's something fascistic about me and my beliefs is something I won't hear said. And you shouldn't believe.
Of the other member of the axis of Nazism and fascism, the Japanese emperor, he wasn't just a theocrat, he was actually a god. Are you telling me Nazism and fascism and the axis were secular? You don't know what you're talking about.
Now, if there's to be a level playing field, which I know that my opponents don't wish for, I want to be told how it is that any society that follows the precepts of Lucretius and of Spinoza and of Galileo and of Russell and of Voltaire and Jefferson and Paine and Einstein has ever fallen into the same pit of ignorance, famine, cruelty, stupidity, hysteria, witch hunting that is the special privilege of the faithful. So that's my short answer to your question. Let's try that for an experiment and see who comes out better.
I, for one, will take it as extremely insulting if any person of faith makes the assumption that their faith gives them a moral edge on me. I want to hear a lot more apologizing from the faith-based communities for the evil that they've done before they even start clearing their throats and telling me I wouldn't know right from wrong without their permission. I'm sorry, I won't be, can't be spoken to in that tone of voice, and nor should any of you.
Isn't it rather odd to be told to love? It's always seemed bizarre to me.
Well, you know, from my point of view, it's extraordinarily helpful because
Ordered to love. I don't. Something is cranky there.
In Christianity, you have the idea, for example, that morality is intentional. If you've contemplated the sin, Christ says, in a sense, you've committed it.
Thought crime.
One second. The mullah
Thought
doesn't.
crime. Totalitarianism again. Thought crime.
Whether it is or not.
We know what you're thinking, and we can punish you for it. Totalitarianism defined. Tyranny defined. Thought crime. You said it for me.
If there is a way to pay for those sins, and all you have to do is utter the word yes to salvation, what obstinacy forces you to say, I won't do it, I will risk all of damnation with my full intelligence and free will?
I don't think he understands how wicked he sounds to so many people in this hall tonight. When he says, look, you've made a perfectly fair offer, we can torture you to death if we want, for the crime only of being born, but all you have to do is throw yourself on our mercy, and it'll be okay. Why don't you just do it? I can hardly bear to look at you.
You're implying
that you could say something so evil, so stupid, so nasty, and so intolerant. It is the most refinement of cruelty and stupidity that it's possible to picture.
It's
and
really
you don't
not.
get
There
it when
is
people ask, does it seem okay to you? Say, you always have the chance to sprawl and grovel and beg and plead, and you might get off. Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? It's all summarized in one line, if you wish. To believe what Dr. Dembski believes and his co-thinkers believe, you have to consider yourself created incurably sick and then ordered on pain of death and eternal torture to be well. This is not morality.
Do you think that you would win more converts to atheism if you were less dismissive of religious
I have no
people
idea,
and
but
religious
I can't be other than dismissive. I don't feel any need to make converts by not saying what I think. I leave it to them to make their hypocritical, unctuous, pseudo-friendly statements in the hope of keeping people inside the church.
I want to go back to this importance of narrative in its own right. They're fables, they're folk tales that have endured. They're not literally true, but there's great value in the universal truths that are taught just by the story itself. For example, the creation story. Could you at all agree with me that some of those stories are valuable just as a metaphor?
The creation story is ridiculous garbage and has given us a completely false picture of our origin as a species and the origins of the cosmos. It's done nothing but harm, and it's considered laughable by anyone who's ever studied the subject. I mean, if you want me to give you a good mythical, quasi-mythical story, it would be the life of Socrates. We have no proof, as with Jesus, that he ever existed. So it doesn't matter to me whether he did or not, because we have his teachings and his method of thinking and his extreme intellectual and moral courage. And anyone who could look me in the eye and say they preferred the story of Jesus or Moses or Muhammad to the life of Socrates would, I think, be, I have to say it to you, intellectually defective.
My question is to Christopher is how you can justify wanting to take something away from people, from 95 that gives meaning to 95% of the American people, and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people.
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so as Freud said in Future of Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death. Which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. I'm not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
One of the reasons why I like doing this, some people say sometimes, don't I ever get tired of debating with the religious? No, absolutely I don't, because you never know what they're going to say next. Sam and I don't mind being called predictable. It's very easy. We know what we think. We say straight out where we think we know, where we think it's not possible to know, why we don't think there's a supernatural, and so on. But this evening already we've had your suggestion that God is only really a guru, a friend when you're in need. I mean, he wouldn't do anything like bugger around with Job to prove a point. And which, if I now tell you, well, that must mean that that book is not the Word of God, you'd say, well, whoever believed that ever was the Word of God? Let me just tell you something. For hundreds and thousands of years, this kind of discussion would have been in most places impossible to have, or Sam and I would have been having it at the risk of our lives. Religion now comes to us in this smiley face, ingratiating way, because it's had to give so much ground, and because we know so much more. But you've no right to forget the way it behaved when it was strong, and when it really did believe that it had God on its side.
Now, why now? Why am I doing this now, people ask. Well, I'll tell you why now, because in the last few years it's become impossible to turn a page of a newspaper without being, as the religious would say, offended. I'm offended that people in this country believe that they have the right to advocate the teaching of garbage to children under the fatuous name of intelligent design. I believe that we're... I thought you'd never clap. Just as I believe that where religion ends, philosophy begins, where alchemy ends, chemistry begins, where astrology ends, astronomy begins, and now the people will say, well, let's give equal time to astrology in the schools. It's nonsense, dangerous and sinister nonsense. The Pope says
AIDS may be bad, but condoms are much worse. What kind of moral teaching is this? And how many people are going to die for such dogma? You see what I mean? So, I'll be very brief. There's an end to this, an end particularly to the cultural cringe that says that if someone can claim to be a religious spokesman, they are entitled to respect. I have to say it in your presence, sir. I think that the title Reverend is something people should be more concerned to live down than to live up to. Thank you.
Do I, who've read Freud and know what the future of an illusion really is, and know that religious belief is ineradicable as long as we remain a stupid, poorly evolved mammalian species, think that some Canadian law is going to solve this problem? Please. No, our problem is this: our prefrontal lobes are too small, and our adrenaline glands are too big, and our thumb finger opposition isn't all that it might be. And we're afraid of the dark, and we're afraid to die, and we believe in the truths of holy books that are so stupid and so fabricated that a child can, and all children do, but as you can tell by their questions, actually see through them. And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt, and I claim that right.
Now let's take a case of someone who's been dealt a bad hand. What about Fräulein Freisel in Austria, whose father, unwilling to get out of the way, kept her in a dungeon where she didn't see daylight for 24 years and came down most nights to rape and to sodomize her, often in front of the children who were the victims of the previous attacks and offenses. And it's only purely by accident that Herr Freisel is now in custody. And it's a shame that he's 76, because his life imprisonment isn't going to feel enough like that to him. I want you to just take a moment, since we're so interested in the downtrodden and the helpless. Imagine how she must have begged him. Imagine how she must have pleaded. Imagine for how long. Imagine how she must have prayed every day, how she must have beseeched heaven. Imagine, for 24 years, and no answer at all. Nothing. Imagine how those children must have felt. Imagine what they felt when they saw one of their number, the dead twin, being borne away from neglect on top of everything else. Now, you say that's all right that she went through that, because she'll get a better deal in another life? I have to ask you, if you can be morally or ethically serious and postulate such a question. No, that had to happen, and heaven did watch it with indifference, because it knows that score will later on be settled. So it was well worth her going through it. She'll have a better time next time. I don't see how you can look anyone in the face, or live with yourself, and say anything so hideously, wickedly immoral as that, or even imply it. There, that's my answer. Unanswered questions. Amazing. No one, though they were asked repeatedly, would say whether they thought Stephen Fry, my friend, was in a state of mortal sin or not. They wouldn't tell you. Something about the question brought out their inner coward. Well, I say that homosexuality is not just a form of sex, it's a form of love, and it deserves our respect for that reason. That when my children were young, I'd have been proud to have Stephen as their babysitter, and I'd told them they were lucky. And if anyone came to my door as a babysitter wearing holy orders, I'd call first a cab and then the police. But none of these things apply to the case of Mother Teresa, because it's a simple matter of record that she was a fanatic and a fundamentalist and a fraud. I think probably the most successful confidence trickster of the last century, and responsible for innumerable deaths and for untold suffering and misery, and proud of it. Should I just assert this, or would you require any proof? We know how fair-minded some people can be.
I just learned about John Roger and Charles Keating, for example.
Well,
thank you, John.
There's one way, there are two ways of doing it. One is you say, well, if she was so wonderful, how come she went to Haiti at the invitation of the Duvalier family, took money from them which didn't belong to them, had been stolen from the Haitian poor, said how wonderful the situation was for the poor in Haiti, how the poor loved the Duvaliers and the Duvaliers loved them back. How does she get to Haiti in the first place? She's supposed to be in Calcutta. You've got to get all the way to Haiti to praise a regime that is notorious for its wringing of the poor. Well, she did it because out of solidarity with people who thought like her, and because she needed their money, which they'd stolen, as she stole hers from Charles Keating of the Lincoln Savings and Loan, who gave her $1.5 million and a private jet in return. Pretty good deal, actually, for an olive crucifix and a blessing when he was on trial. He needed a character witness. The court then wrote to her and said, "You've got $1.5 million of the dollars we're looking for that belong to the poor of California. Do you feel like giving it back?" She never replied. She'd written to the court in the first. That's just the fraudulence. That's just touching on the fraudulence. But by the way, if any of what I've just said is true, and it all is, how come you need me to tell you? How come that my profession hasn't enlightened you about this already? How come this woman stands underneath a Niagara of undiluted free publicity for all these years? With every 72 virgins that they get in paradise, they also get 72 mothers-in-law. So perhaps in the end, you're.
It occurs to me as you're both talking that both of you have faced serious illness in your lives, and I'm wondering if that at all has shaped your view of the afterlife. Christopher?
I would say it fractionally increases my contempt for the false consolation element of religion and my dislike for the dictatorial and totalitarian part of it. But I presume what I say by the first is self-evident. But what I mean by the second is it's considered perfectly normal in this society to approach dying people who you don't know but who are unbelievers and say, "Now are you going to change your mind?" In fact, it's considered almost a polite question. And as you know, there's a long history of fraud about this. People claim that Darwin had a deathbed recantation. They'd made up lies about Thomas Paine. It goes on all the time. It's a very nasty little history. But there's also a horrible undertone of blackmail to it. People write and say, "Look, you've got about one chance left now. Aren't you going to take it? I'm writing to you as a friend." They've even tried it on me when I've been very ill and I haven't had quite the vinegar I'd like to have had in a hospital bed. I don't mind, I can take it. But I think there are a lot of people older than myself, iller than myself, perhaps at the risk of seeming conceited, less educated than myself, to whom that's a horrible experience. It's very depressing and alarming to be spoken to in that way. I mean, if Sam and I were to form a corps of people to go around religious hospitals, which is what happens in reverse, and say to people who are lying in pain, say, "Did you say you were Catholic?" "Yes." "Well, look, you may only have a few days left, but you don't have to live them as a serf, you know. Just recognize that was all bullshit, that the priests have been cheating you. And I guarantee you'll feel better." I don't think that would be very ethical.
Okay, but
I think it would be something of a breach of taste. But if it's in the name of if it's in the name of God, it has a social license. Well, fuck that is what I say. And will say, if it's my last breath. Thank you.
Brad.
Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? But there may be a slight edge here. We don't believe anything that could be called wishful. In other words, we don't particularly welcome the idea of the annihilation either of ourselves as individuals, that the party will go on and will have left and we're not coming back, or of the entropic heat death of the universe. We don't like the idea, but there's a good deal of evidence to suggest that that is what's going to happen. And there's very, very little evidence to suggest that I'll see you all again in some theme park.
Brutal.
One nice and one nasty experience. There's absolutely no evidence for that at all. Okay, let me see. I don't think it's going to take 10 minutes to disprove the existence of God. The metaphysical claims of religion are untrue. Thank you. I know what's coming. I know no one beats these odds
And it's a matter of getting used to that and growing up and realizing that you're expelled from your mother's uterus as if shot from a cannon towards a barn door studded with old nail files and rusty hooks. It's a matter of how you use up the intervening time in an intelligent and ironic way, and try not to do anything ghastly to your fellow creatures.
We don't want people to live without wonder or mystery, and in fact we thoroughly recommend. Take a look through the Hubble telescope. See if you can get over what you see, the unbelievable beauty and symmetry and majesty of what you'll see. And you want to exchange this for the burning bush? I don't think you will once you've done it. Read a page of Stephen Hawking on the event horizon, for example, and see if that isn't awe-inspiring enough for anybody. And you're seeing there the future of a potentially much more noble and ennobled and enlightened and emancipated humanity, where none of these discoveries and none of this awe and majesty requires that you kill anyone in the name of some man-made idol or god or superstition. For heaven's sake, let's get this out of the way.
The fear of death will not leave us. I mean, nobody doesn't have it sometimes. I'm not particularly afraid of it because I'm not going to know I'm dead, so there will be nothing to be afraid of in that way. But the thought of not being here while you are pisses me off a bit.
Close on the implied question that Bill asked me earlier. Why don't you accept this wonderful offer? Why wouldn't you?
Something that I urgently felt I ought to do or say. And one mustn't repine or give in to self-pity about that. But at this present moment, I have to say, I feel very envious of someone who's young and active and starting out in this argument. Just think of the extraordinary things that are happening to us. Go, for example, to the Smithsonian Museum, to the new, I hope you've done it, to the new Hall of Human Origins. Magnificently curated new exhibition, which shows, among other things, the branch, or branches along which perhaps three, certainly three, maybe four if you count Indonesia, humanoid, shall we say, anthropoid species, died out not very long ago, within measurable distance of 75,000 years or so. Possibly destroyed by us, possibly not, we don't know. We know they decorated their graves. We think they probably had language ability. We don't know if they had souls. I'm sorry, I can't help you. But I so envy those who could glimpse, I only mentioned 3 or 4 of the things that have magnetized and charmed and gratified me to think about in the recent past, and how much I hope that each of you forms some such ambition this evening and carries it forward. In the meantime, we have the same job we always had, to say as thinking people and as humans that there are no final solutions. There is no absolute truth. There is no supreme leader. There is no totalitarian solution that says that if you will just give up your freedom of inquiry, if you will just give up, if you will simply abandon your critical faculties, a world of idiotic bliss can be yours. But we have to begin by repudiating all such claims. Grand rabbis, chief ayatollahs, infallible popes, the peddlers of surrogate and mutant quasi-political religion and worship. The dear leader, the great leader, we have no need of any of this. And looking at them and their record and the pathos of their supporters, I realized that it is they who are the grand impostors. And my own imposture this evening was marred by comparison. Thank you very much.
I'd like to take a moment, as many people have, to just acknowledge the void that is left by the death of our friend Hitch. While it might be possible to guess what he would have thought about a number of the topics raised here, it's almost impossible to imagine how well he would have expressed those thoughts. The man had more wit and style and substance than a few civilizations I could name.